okay, got to have a vision, got to have a mission, got to have a purpose, got to have all this. So it's like, and I sort of visualize people going through the exercise, and then if they even do the exercise, then they just tuck it away in their drawer. And they go, we got it all done. But I don't think that it's really interesting, because then I look at it and I go, well, we really didn't do what I call a traditional purpose statement, right? We did it more like a blend. Like the vision is where we want to go, and our sort of our mission statement is kind of the why and how combined, right? So, and then our values really sort of came out of desperation, right?
The archipelago awaits.
Values, I don't think change. I think values just keep getting refined and refined over time as you pick apart like what works well, what didn't work well. And then you dive in deeper and you keep refining those until you get to that set that really speak to who you are or the company that you want to build.
100%. And we have another one, candor is at the root of the relationship. So that to me is a reflection of both myself as an example and the company, in the sense that we lose so much time by, proverbial beating around the bush or not being clear or whatever. And some of it's just, let's say, a miscommunication, but the fact that sometimes we're afraid to say, so we wanted it to be, what would it be? Could we create a scenario where we had an open forum where everybody trusted each other enough, and you could say something and it wasn't taken out of context? Like when I talk about candor, it's like when you're with your best friend and you can say anything, they don't take it the wrong way because you have all the history together. They know you're looking out for them. And what if we could try to replicate that or recreate that in the business? How much time would we save? That was the idea, versus, because that's where really in the business we're thinking about efficiency. But just think about how many times all the stuff that where you don't get a clear message, or it's misunderstood, or it's taken the wrong way. What if we could get it so that we could have a candid discussion and we could get to it and it was all done in the right context? We thought that would move the company quite a bit. So,
yeah, and I think that's where values really play a really big role, is boundaries and quick decision making. Because I bet if I asked you deeper questions on candor and how candor more applies to you in your personal life, and probably along the lines of how you appreciate your time and where you spend your time, is that you don't want to have to necessarily beat around the bush to be able to get the outcome or be able to communicate the message. So then that's a boundary that you're kind of setting in your personal life and in the business. And then it gives you a way to be able to make really quick decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So I sort of think about, like, I think back, let's say personally, let's say historically, we've all been in school and we've all taken tests and all the different things in and out of school. We'd take these tests and we get a result. And so you take the test and you get 65 out of 100. For a lot of people, they always had this thing where they talk to them and they're stressed right out because of the test and all that. I never experienced that. And I didn't really connect to what they were doing, because the way I looked at it for myself was, if I got 65, that told me that I have 35 to go. And all I needed to know is where I truly am. So that's that candidness. So to me, I wasn't afraid of a mark of 20, 40, 60, 80. It just was, that's where you are. So these are the improvements you need to do. And that's it. Versus some other people, I got 60, and they lose their mind over it. To me, it was like, so that's that root of candidness, is just, I want feedback that tells me where I'm at and the things I need to do if I'm really trying to be the best version of myself. And in turn, if our company's trying to be the best version of itself. So to me, that's how that candid comes in, and why we put that in there. It's because otherwise we're kidding ourselves. Imagine you take the test and the teacher says to you, well, I'm not going to give you a mark, but you did pretty good. You're like, what the hell is that? Like, I can't take the next step off of that, right? Tell me I suck at it, then I'll work at it, do whatever. But I wasn't afraid of that, because it was just about this constant improvement. So to me, it was just, tell me where I'm at and I'll just take the next steps and what the steps would be to be a better version. So very interesting. Yeah.
So, I pictured in my head, if we changed the education system to be more like that,
yeah.
If we never gave direct feedback on where people can improve, but then we tried to just kind of tailor to where that person is and try to like kind of lift them up, like, okay, well, no, actually, like Jimmy, say you're not good at math, but you know what, we'll put you inside of here and we'll, like we talk about, we'll just get you to do addition. That's it. That's where we can stop, and,
Yeah.
and that's all we'll do.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like that. I think that we talk about all these, they give participation ribbons. Like, growing up, you got first, second, third, or you didn't qualify, and that was okay. But I think we've shifted away from that, where everybody's it's more important just to be there. Well, that is true, except for it doesn't really set you up in the real world that that's the case, right? So to me, the feedback isn't a problem until you believe it's a problem. To me, candidness isn't a problem. Now, if it's done to be malicious, and that's not candidness, that's just being a dick. But if you're doing it for the right reason, which means you want to lift the person beside you, then and that person understands that about you, then that clarity, that feedback is what they need, what you need, and the company needs. So
that's what I always encourage people in our business to look at, is to look at the intentions, to look at where the person is coming from, because lots of the times we deliver the message, or the message gets received with a different spin on it or a different purpose. But if you can look past like the direct communication of the message, and if you can look more at the intention of what the person's saying, then you can pull out the deeper causes of what it is that they're trying to tell you. Because if like the intentions are that I'm here to support you and I want to make you a better version of yourself, then yeah, sometimes I'm probably going to say some things that are going to push some boundaries. And if you take them at face level, it's not going to be dressed up perfectly every time. But if you look at it at that deeper level, then you can see more of the intentions behind it. And then you can strip past that and try to get more to the direct root cause. And then I also feel like that also builds healthier relationships.
yeah, 100%. I think it's that proverbial, you killed the messenger, when really it's the message. What's in the message? But a lot of that has to do with the trust in the environment, and also just have you set that precedent. So just imagine you've never done that, and all of a sudden you decide to take that route one day. It would freak people out because they wouldn't have the context around it. Probably the best example of that in a business years ago, they had where one person was trying to be friends with everybody. And then they had a problem, and so then they thought, well, now I'll step up and be I'll use it an authority figure or whatever, and I'll deliver the message. Well, that went over like a lead weight. It was really bad. And what was interesting is the person that got it delivered to, I had the discussion and probably delivered, I would probably say 5 times as serious a message to them. And they thanked me profusely. Like they said, that's great. And then the person that delivered the original one couldn't figure out, well, how is that possible when I deliver, at a 20% level and you deliver at an 80, but yet the person thanks you. And I said, it's because I always deliver at that. And where you were like trying to be the friend, and the next day you're being the opposite of that. They don't have any context or anything. They can't anchor to anything. Where me, I'm just consistent like that. I'm always looking out for you. There it is. I'll give you some direct feedback. There it is. But they know it isn't about cutting them down. It's about saying, how do we together move forward? And they just didn't sense that. So you have to create that environment. You don't just do it in a snap of a finger and go, tomorrow I'm starting to be candid. You'll freak people out because they will go, where the hell did that come from? So you got to build that trust environment, and they've got to be confident in that you do have their best interest, right? So
yeah, that plays into one of our values. It's called Partners in Success. So what we do is whatever relationship we get into inside of the business, if it's with a client, with a college, or even just like relationships among like all the employees inside of the business, we want to frame it as we're partners in each other's success. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to push and be able to support each other and be able to see how can we make each other more successful. And that applies out to everywhere. So like I said, to clients, which is interesting because I can tie that back to, I was looking at some of our previous values, and one of our previous values was respect everyone and everything. But what happened is we ended up taking that value off of our list because this was when the refining came in, where we're like, you know what, if you're actually a partner in success with someone, like you will respect them. And you can be partners in success with pretty much everything that you interact with. So we refined that value because we didn't think we had to communicate that. where if you're living that partner in success mentality, it gets encapsulated inside of it. And then it's easier to say, are you being a partner in success? Now there's less to focus on, but that one value has higher meaning.
Yeah, and I think you're talking to it. So then, interesting when you're saying that, I'm thinking in my brain that what you're saying is as you live the business, you can see that your values don't change. It's whether the messaging is exactly right in the value, but those values are the thing that you live every day in the business. So I think as you go down that in a company, I think at first people do a list just to check it. But then when they step back and say, hey, wait a minute. So for instance, for us, when we looked at some of these, we said, we need to shape sort of not only the direction of the company, but the people inside of here in terms of saying, what if they don't do that? Or what if we see some stuff that we think behavior-wise that they had? What if we saw that come out? What value would protect the company from that? Because of all the, the experience we had at that time of all the stuff. So it was very interesting. We've had our set of values, but then we also did this one where we did these EQ pillars. So again, a lot of this stuff, in my mind, comes out of the necessity. Maybe at the very first day you got in business, if you're fresh out of, you write some down and you take it from some other companies. But if you've been in business a bit, then you pretty well can see that without these clear things, and even with them, people are going to do whatever they're going to do and act the way they would. But it's more importantly to say if we all stayed within a range of these values, or in our case, we also did a parallel EQ pillars, which is really about we see behavior sets and we say we need help from the company to define and refine people down what I call the chute. It's like for me, like a giant funnel. Everybody's floating around the wide end of the funnel, and we need to narrow it down and get to the narrow end of the funnel. So what would do that? And I think if you sit down and think about, I don't care if you think about a community, even looking out on the streets where we're sitting today, that's the reason why you have speed limits, you have all these things. It's because the greater whole wants everybody collectively to be safe, and they put those things in there, those guidelines, and you say those fences, those barriers, or
boundaries,
the boundaries of it, so that we all function in a sort of a normalized range that doesn't put anybody at risk. And that's what, to me, values do and those EQ pillars do. It's saying if we operated this way, we should have decent efficiency, protect people within it, and get the outcome. So it's kind of like the pathway or the highway that we're going to run, the roadway of our communities, our business communities that we run. So
yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, is look at it at the behavior set, because we have 3 values. The other 2 are the freedom to act and execute and iterate. So if I think about those 2, they're both behavior sets, and partners in success is also a behavior set. Yep. Because when it comes to execute and iterate, where we're at being a startup company, it's about shipping code, shipping product, learning from it, executing on it, iterating over top of it. So having more recurrences of that thing that you're doing. So if we can write more, be able to ship more to the client, be able to get that feedback faster, and be able to iterate on top of it, make changes, get feedback live, the faster we'll learn. And then it pairs with the freedom to act. That used to be the freedom to succeed, but again, we refined it because we didn't want to bucket success. It's like you don't have to pigeonhole yourself. Like, yes, we want the outcome of success. That's the outcome we want, but we would rather have people act than people only act if their confidence is going to lead to success. And then that tells us, well, if we're pairing that with execute and iterate, that means you have to ship code. But the freedom to act means, okay, well, now I actually have the autonomy to be able to make decisions, to be able to act on, put myself in positions where I can make the best of choices for me, because we have more of a flexible work environment. So we want to attract behavior sets that come to us and be like, great, I can work hybrid. I'm focusing on the outcome of what I'm doing. So if I stay up later to be able to try to make a deadline or be able to ship a piece of code, well, then you should sleep in the next morning or take like half a day off later in the week, right? So it's that freedom to act and to act in the best interest of yourself. And then if we put those behavior sets together, like really they're a representation of like myself and my business partner, because that's how we want to act in the business.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, I think you touch on the very end. You're right about that. I think these are reflections of the way you function, the way we function, the way you think it should function, and we put those in there. And sometimes it seems maybe on some level silly that why do we have to outline that, candor, like that we should be able to just tell each other what's going on. But all these are around the behavior sets that we see sometimes that probably don't fit. And so these ones also protect the culture to say, that's kind of the entry to get in here. If you can't do these 4 or 5 things and operate functionally inside there, then very likely this won't be a long-term fit for you. Because, right? So in other words, all the way down, if you're saying like yourselves, if you take a look at it and there's, you're gonna, you got the autonomy to make a decision, but if people can never make decisions in default, well, that will just drain somebody else because somebody else is sort of covering their ass. So all those things are really about shaping what we think the business, how it should operate. And like I said, that you might refine them a bit, but they're still within the very tight range that you started with. So that was very interesting for us even, is that the values haven't changed from the day one, actually, functionally. Right? There might be a word different in the value, but it really is, this is the way we think it should operate, right? So
if we say like the values inside of the business are like a representation of, say, the leadership inside of the business, building the environment, have you gone through and defined like your set of personal values?
Well, I've done like all those, like we've done so many of these tests you do and all this stuff. I don't know if I have one personally where I lay down, but I would know probably off the cuff that the things that probably 4 or 5 or 6 things that would describe myself are the things I believe. It probably hasn't ever changed functionally, right? One, I know we did this one that had like maybe 100 values, and you start with 100, pick out 20, and then you pick out the 20 and get it down to 10, then to 5. Mine functionally don't change that. There's not huge variance in that, the things I think. So, I mean, if we went down the list, I suspect some of ours I would probably overlap in terms of, right? So when they talk about friends, family, and that's important, obviously, right? Truth, candor, integrity, all that kind of stuff, so mine would be very tight, but I don't have a list of 5 that I would say that screams at me. I just probably, if you went and said over the last 20 years, you probably could say the way you lived your life, and that would be the values, because otherwise I'd be not congruent to my life or the way I live. So
yeah, it's interesting because like I feel like I'm more in a phase of life. So I actually did this. About 3 weeks ago, I went down and I wrote out my personal values, because these last, I would say, 10 years of my life, so the 20s, has really kind of shaped who I am and a bunch of the experiences that I've had.
Yeah.
And like I've tried to be more intentional on trying to figure out, even just like recording this podcast and listening back to the audio, I can see the patterns of the things that I keep talking about. One is create the environment, and that is a personal value of mine. So I wrote it down and I created a list of these values, and I feel like it actually helped frame it in my mind. But the part that I like about it is that it's a starting point. So and I have this set, even I was looking at this set before the podcast, and I was like, okay, you know what? These 2 actually I think can be refined down or refined out. So I can start like building more of the boundaries inside of my life to help me make faster decisions that align more with who I am.
Yeah, and when you do that in that alignment to your life, do you find at times like, not because you don't have the clarity of that, is it more to do with that when you look historically at a situation, then you go, well, the reason it didn't feel right, it wasn't aligned, was because of this very thing, that I have this set, this situation or person wasn't aligned to that, then that's why it is.
Absolutely. So the story that comes to my mind, it was actually my 3rd year of university, the summer. So I wanted to make more money over the summer, and I had a friend working construction, working crazy hours. He was a journeyman scaffolder. Okay. And so he was making pretty good money, and he was like, there's a job in Lethbridge. He's like, come, I'll get you on this job site. We'll pretty much work all summer. We'll make some good money. We'll get a different experience. Yeah. So I said, yeah, great, let's do it. So the one thing about scaffolding, so I don't know if you don't know what scaffolding is. Basically, if you look on the outside of a building that's getting built, you'll see a bunch of metal tubes. And what is it? It's temporary work platforms to allow workers to get to areas that you just can't get to. And the thing about scaffolders is you have to be a different type of person to want to put yourself in those situations. So over that summer, I worked with some of the craziest people like I've ever met in my whole entire life. So we had this one. So what we were doing in Lethbridge is we were building scaffold underneath a bridge. So what would happen is we would put these 8-foot trusses out and we would swing them out. And then we would have to put a piece of plywood in to kind of temporarily hold this structure out. So basically, if you looked under a bridge, there would be chains hanging down, and then there would be a platform, a level platform that hung out. But when we put out the next 8 feet, it would sag down. So what we would have to do is we'd have to walk out onto the edge where it's sagging down. We called it walking the plank.
Yeah.
Since I was the lightest guy on the crew, we literally had a plank that we had to put on the scaffold where I had to get on the other side of the bridge. So I had to carry probably this 25, 30-pound clamp, walk the plank. We had 2 guys standing on the other side of the plank. I had to walk the plank and be able to put the clamp on the outside of the bridge. So I'm pretty much over the side of the scaffold, standing on top of the water. And then I would have to hold the clamp there. And then they would put the clamp on the other side, and then we could chain it up so then it was level again. And that happened all of the time. So these are some of the craziest people like I've ever worked with. The job was behind schedule, so the big regional boss came down and he brought his best journeyman. His name was Elfie. So Elfie was pretty much like pure muscle, and he had so much energy, like so much energy. Later I came to find out like all that muscle came from steroids and all the energy came from drugs. But so the first week, like Elfie was on fire. Elfie picked up the pace of that job like crazy because he was running around going everywhere. But Elfie liked to party at night too. So it was literally a week later, like the job's getting back on track. The big regional boss comes back down and he goes, "Where's Elfie?" And we're like, "I don't know, it's about 11 a.m. We get there at 7 a.m. Yeah. We're like, we haven't seen Elfie. We're not sure where Elfie is." And so we're on the scaffold. Behind the big regional boss is this big pile of garbage. So he starts getting mad and he goes, "Where's Elfie? I brought him down here to speed up this job. Where's Elfie?" He turns around, he kicks this big sheet of plastic. Boop, out comes Elfie. He wrapped himself up in all of the plastic and was taking a nap because he was out partying the week before. So then that job gets on track. Half of our crew goes down to Red Deer, and I get a call. The Red Deer job's behind track. So he asked me to go out and go to Red Deer. So I'm like, great. Like I wanted to work these hours. I wanted to make some more money. Let's go to Red Deer. No joke. 2 weeks later, that journeyman gets hooked back on drugs. So he's gone. He's just on the streets of Red Deer. He just doesn't show up one day. The rest of the crew quits. It's just me and my buddy from university. And we need a journeyman on site so we can even work. So then guess who shows up the next day? It's Elfie. Elfie's back. So to your point, like I look back historically on these things. And in that case, I learned what I didn't want. Which is just as important to learning what I want.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's just the opposite. Like I don't want to be surrounded by Elfies.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. And that's where create the environment comes from, is I want to be able to create the environment that I'm in. And I want to be able to choose who I can surround myself with. So then inside of the business, it's perfect because I literally can choose. We can set our values inside of the company. We can say, hey, these are the 3 behavior sets that we want. And now I can go out and hire and see people that are aligned with those behavior sets. And then I can create the environment. But it all came from behaviors, history, and getting exposed to different people and different actions. And then me looking back and saying, okay, actually, I really don't want to be surrounded by Elfies.
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly it. I think for all of us, I think we have experiences like that we say, that doesn't make sense, or this is not the way I would do it. And I had one sort of not an extreme Elfie one, but a similar one, that a defining one in the sense that when I was there with my son, I was raising my son by myself, and I wanted to go to his school play. So I worked very hard at the job I was at, and so I had asked. I said, "Look, the play starts at 3. I'd like to get down there. So you got to drive there, so 15-minute drive." So in my mind, it's already set that I would probably leave at 2:30, 2:35, and I'd get there. Well, for whatever reason, the person sitting there who thought he was my boss was like, well, we gotta, and he would try to stretch it so that I would barely make it there. It dawned on me, like in my mind, is saying, what kind of work environment that? So let's say, as an example, I was late to that or didn't get there. When I come back, I'm not productive then. I'm irritated by this guy, why he would do this kind of idea. So to me, when one of the first things I did in the environments we created when working for ourselves or creating these companies was allowing that autonomy, allowing people to they know what they need in their lives. And it's just like people go, you got to work right to 4:30. And then you see these people sitting there at 10 after 4, and they're just basically checked out of sitting at the desk because they're staring at the clock. But it's imperative, in our brain, the boss is staring there, 4:30, you got to wait. And they just don't understand that you're not getting productivity of these people. We're not working with these people to understand, to partner with them in the success. Obviously it was very important for me to be there in my son's life and in those moments. And yet he wouldn't give me that extra minute or two and then expects, theoretically doesn't even correlate it to what the output would be. So to me, I always made it so that people were flexible. If they needed to go, to your point, they stayed up late or did work or there's something important in life, we support them, we partner with them. So that then when they come back, it is this work environment worked with me. I want to give better output, better efficiency. So it's just all this short thinking people that you come across, but you do come across those situations where you say, if I was creating it, if in that moment I was saying, if I was creating this environment, it never will look like this. I don't know what it should look like, but it shouldn't look like this. And then I think that's what you're talking about it. And then we create those cultures and those environments where I think people can prosper inside of that, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of funny you say that because I have times where it's 3:30 and I'm tired and I'm trying to get work done. And I tell everyone that if they're tired and they're not productive, just go home. I'm like, what am I doing here?
Yeah, exactly.
I should just go home.
Yeah.
And then I can take a nap, I can go work out, I can go do whatever I want. And then if I can come back to this later.
Yeah.
Because I know I have the time and I kind of set my life up for that. So why am I here trying to push through something when my mind and my heart's in somewhere else?
But I think we still have all that historical one where this micromanagement, punching the clock, it's so counterproductive, truthfully, for the people and your partner for success. That's not partnering on either front for success, them individually or the company. And so that flexibility, you say, if people are tired or do whatever. Now, I want to just be clear in my mind, that's not Alfie tired because I partied all night, but just normally, you have the things or something is just weighing on your mind, you're better off to go free it up and then come back to sort of, but that relationship, that it has to be a two-way street. So it has to be that flexibility, and that is not, it's a give and take. And what I see sometimes is it starts out as a give and take, and then pretty soon it's a take. And then you end up on the wrong side of the partner of success. Partners in success means you're both contributing and both giving and taking. When one partner just takes, then I would argue that the partnership ends. And that's what we see sometimes. So that very flexibility, which is awesome and incredible for people, it is also a very double-edged sword that a lot of times people can't handle that and self-destruct because of that sort of flexibility. So yeah.
And that actually ties into, so I'm actually playing with a new value right now. It's called build energy, or maybe it's protect momentum. So after I did this exercise, I defined my personal values. I was so excited. I had so much energy. I felt like I was on top of the world. And then 2 days later, I was almost depressed. And I was like, well, what happened? What happened in those 3-day span that I went from having so much energy to then being able to be so low of energy? And then so over the next week, I built my energy back up, and then I started feeling good. And then I went out to the Calgary Stampede and I had a lot of Elfie fun, and I come back and I'm a little Elfie tired. And then I was in that spot where my energy was drained. And then now I spent the whole week trying to get my energy back up. So now I'm playing with this value of when you have energy, when you're working with people, right? That's kind of where my thought came from is when you're working with people and if they go too far to one side of the spectrum, they're actually pulling more of your energy. And if you're not protecting or building your energy, it can disappear so fast. So then when I'm thinking about that value of my life, it's like, I want to play around with that and be able to refine it, because what does that look like? Because it also ties into one of my other ones. It's called authentic energy. So I spent probably about a year and a half like really trying to find out, what does authenticity mean to me?
Yeah.
Right? So I spent probably a year and a half. And then when I get to these points where I'm trying to define more of like what my values are, it's a lot faster because, like I said, this span of my 20s was really a lot of trying to figure out what is my authentic energy. And then now that, say you build that energy, it's like, okay, how do you keep it going? How can you protect it and how can you build on it?
Yeah, it's interesting because then it's the people, like we talk about the people that you're in proximity, either add to the energy, or I call sometimes to those people mufflers. And that means because every time you're near them, you're exhausted. But it's also like these little things in my mind, like a wheelbarrow, like you said earlier. In a wheelbarrow, you go, what's the reference? Well, the reference is you're forever pushing them. Mm-hmm. So there's a point where you can't have the wheelbarrows around you. You got to push some people, but then they've got to be able to, these things got to operate themselves. But you're right about that. I think what you notice is the people you're in proximity to really can add energy, or there are energy suckers like extraordinaire. And those ones, I still to this day have challenges with that in terms of they just suck the life right out of you. And then where you have all this energy and then you go and it's it's almost like Eeyore from the Winnie the Pooh. It's like, it's just that kind of energy. Try to just put a no entrance to can't be near me.
Yeah, that's where I feel like to protect it and to build it is like one of the most important things to do.
Incredible.
Because building it is hard and it takes time. Like it took a week, it took a week to get it back.
Yeah.
And when you lose it, you can lose it in a blink of an eye. A bad comment, a muffler coming around and gassing you out. Like it happens so fast and it's gone.
100%. And I think we did an exercise here over the last couple of years where it was the 5 people you spend the most time with, that you're really a reflection in any given moment of the people you spend the most time with. And if you sit there and 2 or 3 of them are mufflers, then it's very, very difficult to do that. So I think when you look at that and the people in your lives and the people, now sometimes in a work environment, maybe it's different, but you can tell the people that either, like if we took anybody random, like right now, if I went down to you and said, and I don't know, just name 50 people you're closest with, and then put just on a piece of paper, they energize you, they're neutral, or they take away, and you just quickly went down there, I think you might be surprised really quickly, and we'd be surprised because sometimes a lot of them you'd go, well, that's obvious, I do. But sometimes you might go in and realize that some of them are family or all the way through, like for all of us. And I think when we step back from that list, we go, wow. And so yeah, we go over here and we get energized only to throw that energy away on the neutral, or even worse on the suck the energy side of our lives. So I think we have to limit the exposure if we can. So
yeah, and addressing that, because I've addressed a couple of those situations in my life. It's literally some of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Yeah. I had a relationship in university that span out for probably 3 to 4 years. He was one of my best friends. He was actually one of the guys I scaffolded with. And it turned out to be an energy drainer. And we ended up walking our own ways after university. And I think we're both better off for it. 100%. And when I'd see him, we have great conversations and we catch up, but because I was probably in his life the way he was seeing it, draining energy out of him, because when I saw him, he drained energy out of me. And those were some of the hardest conversations that I've ever had, or decisions that I've had to make in my life.
Yeah, and they are hard ones because sometimes you have to really look at that, and sometimes they're people maybe arguably what is supposed to be the closest to you. Yeah. So interesting when we did that exercise inside of here. One of the guys on the team looked at all the ones and then realized that they had a severe energy sucker. So decided to, I don't want to use the word confront, but basically say to the person, and this, I'm not maybe recommending this perfectly, but basically went up to them and said, I realized I did this thing and I realized that you're sucking all the energy. and the guy told him to F you, and that was it. So I guess that's one way of solving it. But yeah, I think when we look at that, then I think it's more about the exercise of saying, what do we do? What do we do in those work situations, those people situations? How do we have less of the one side and more of the other side? And I think to your point, sometimes it is about shaping the friends and the family and all this stuff, or limiting that, or putting boundaries on it so that you are protected, because the cost of that energy, like, yeah, so it's.
Yeah, well, that actually ties into one of my other personal values, which is thinking opportunities. So if you went and you defined that list of people and we said energy, neutral, mufflers, drainers,
Yeah.
if you're thinking in opportunities, you're basically looking at the world for what it can be and the opportunities that you can pull out of it to put yourself in a better situation. So if you look at that list of mufflers, well, there you can kind of see, yeah, those are really hard conversations that need to be had. But what is the opportunity of having those conversations? Because it's not necessarily always going to be cutting that person out of your life.
No.
It's addressing it for what it is, right? It's addressing it for, you know what, I would, in that relationship, I get the most energy when we spend time doing X. Well, let's do X together. Let's be intentional. Let's do X, Y, and Z. Yeah. But let's put everything else to the side, because that really drains the energy out of me.
100%.
And then that opportunity that comes from that is you being able to build more momentum or build more energy in yourself. So then that's one that I've came from, kind of fleshing out my own values, is being able to think of the world and opportunities, because you're always trying to see what you, again, they all kind of tie into the same behavior set. Yeah. Because then you're trying to look at the environment you can create.
That's really interesting one, isn't it? And how did that go when you did that? Have you done that where let's do more of X and less of the other stuff with a person?
Yeah. So actually one of my best buddies, a lot of the times that we got together, we don't see each other too much. His name's Ryan. So we would always go on fun trips together in university, and we'd go party. So we'd go to Mexico, we went partying, we'd always go on ski trips and we would party. And I told him, I was like, let's do more things, more active things, because I get more energy from doing more active things. No. Right? So I pushed him, I was like, let's do something more active. And then it kind of funny, because it backfired a little bit on me, but he calls me up and he says, let's run a half marathon. So I'm like, okay, well, I want to do more active things. Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? I don't necessarily want to run a half marathon right now, but yes, I'm in. Yeah. Because I asked you, I wanted to do more of this. Yeah. I don't want to take the other parts out of my life, because I still appreciate those times and those memories that we made together. But I want to spend more time being able to create different types of memories together. Mm-hmm. And so what happened is we went to Whistler and we ran the half marathon in Whistler. And it was actually so much fun. And I enjoyed it way more than I thought I was going to enjoy it. And like one of the best parts afterwards is when we're all in pain, walking and limping around Whistler, and everyone's just in it together. And that was so much fun. But that came from like saying, like, let's do something different.
Yeah, for sure.
Seeing that, okay, this kind of does drain the energy out of me. Here are things that give me energy. And it gives him energy too, because that's where a lot of our relationship came from growing up together, is being active and playing sports and working out together and doing these things. So it was kind of reconnecting with those other parts that built our relationship.
Yeah, so when you look at the values, then when we're talking about whether it's personal, whether it's business, it is about shaping the culture, the people, to say, this is kind of where we want more of this, and then the values should flush out the less of that you don't want. And it applies in business as much as personal, all the way. And I really believe that those always are an extension of our personal one, that like where we spend the most time and where we shouldn't spend the most time. So very interesting how when we lay those out, and that's why they're interactive in the sense of, that's why you got to relook at them. We do it every quarter when we look at our strategic stuff. We just go back and say, is there anything glaring or something that just doesn't fit with who we are, what we've done today, you know? So in other words, we didn't just do it, put it in the drawer. And I see that whether it's a strategic plan or values, or people do it one time and they tuck it away and they say, yeah, we did that 4 years ago. And it's like, what? These ones are dynamic. You pull them out, and to me, you look at this and you say, still reflective of where we are, still reflective of our values, still reflective of what we're trying to accomplish, right? And again, the EQ one was done just as an extension of that, to say, there still is some behavior sets that are not aligned to what we want. So why don't we refine it And in our case, what we tried to do is we called it the Twin Cities, that we have an IQ side of the city. It's well refined. We know there you have your sort of your house on the IQ side. What if we went across the river and built a twin city of EQ? And then everybody's journey was to leave the IQ and cross the bridge and then live in as big a house as they can that their mind will allow. Now, fully understanding that we knew that when people started to head down the hill to go across the bridge, a lot of them would never even make it across the bridge. That's was just the truth of the matter, is the behavior sets would never allow them to be in a self-awareness, all this EQ driven community, and some of them would be way out of place. And so in order to be in place, they'd have to change a whole bunch of things and look in the mirror, and a lot of them didn't want to do it. So we did lose some of the people that, as we built this twin city, but really in our view is EQ is the table stakes of tomorrow versus IQ. Because of information and commoditization of information, we felt that would be a better serve than where IQ drove businesses 20, 30, 40 years ago. You can acquire IQ. EQ is the one that was sort of missing. So that's why we built those twin cities together, and felt that if people could live in both cities, then we would have the culture. It would represent the values of the company.
And that's building more boundaries too. For you guys,
Absolutely.
like you said, not everyone made the journey across to the Twin City, but that builds the boundaries and refines that behavior set.
Exactly.
The other thing that you said that I think is so important is that you have to come back to these things, to these behavior sets, because when you're trying to implement, say, a new behavior set, I find I always forget, or I always need to touch base with like little reminders for myself. So what I do is on the background of my phone right now, since what I'm doing right now is defining my values, is I put all my values on the background of my phone. So now every time I pick it up, I have that constant little reminder to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking about. Because I find it's really easy to go back to that default behavior mode. But if you're not consistently reminding, consistently going back and looking at those behavior sets, those values, then you're going to forget, and then things are going to slip by, just because there's so much going on. And it's hard to balance, say you have 5 different values, 3 values, whatever it is, and you're trying to then gauge the business between these different values. Well, guess what? You're also trying to grow your business, manage people, you have your personal life, you have your health. Like there's so much going on in life. To have little personal reminders helps you reconnect with whatever that thing is, and then it helps you to be able to kind of solidify those boundaries more.
100%. And I think, Wes, for us, is that's one of the keys, is we have it visual in our boardroom. We have it, but it's every quarter, every meeting, every time we go over our strat plan, every time with the team, with ourselves, is we cover them. And I guess somebody could say, we did that 10 times ago, but they don't. Because I think we look at it through a different lens every time, just with a little bit of time, because things change so fast in our lives. To your point, we have so much going on that we just keep repeating it. And I think there's a study that says we don't hear something until we've heard it 7 times. So even by the time we think we're getting sick of it, it's probably the time that people are absorbing it, but also the fact that we have different people in the team all the time. So just because we've heard it 40 times, the other people. So we always have it front and center, always as a reminder, always staring us in the face. And then really also making it a part of what I call the quarterly conversations that we have with the people on the team, and how those things. So in other words, is there a time where we're not living those values? And I don't care if anybody in the company sees it. If somebody sees that we're not living the value, they should be candid enough to point that out and say, this seems to be inconsistent with that value. But the values have, like I said, have stood the test of time so far, and really haven't varied much. All the other stuff we might have refined around it, whether it's the mission, whether it's the, the mission, vision, sort of all the way, we've refined that a bit. But the value set is, I would say that if you looked at it, now that you went through that exercise, if we were 10 years from now, you looked at it again, I suspect those values wouldn't be polar opposite 10 years. I think we are who we are. We're hardwired the way we are, and I think it's reflective of the values. So I would suspect that the value set probably hasn't changed much in 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years for me in the core.
Yeah, it's little tweaks. That's what I've really found too, is if you have those little reminders, quarterly reminders, be able to put it in little spots where you're looking at it every day to remind you of those values.
Yeah.
But then you can just tweak them, deliver them in a different message, apply them to situations that happened, be able to address like hardships inside of the business today and link them back to the values. Then it becomes more deeply ingrained in your thought patterns and kind of who you are as a person. So then you don't need those little tiny consistent reminders, because you're always now coming back to those patterns that you've set out. And since they're deeply ingrained, now it's easier to be able to link it, and it's easier to be able to communicate it. But you're right, you basically just end up repeating what you're saying over and over and over and over again. I feel like it doesn't get tiring when it's like something that's deeply important to you. And if it's deeply important to you, then you'll be happy to repeat it, because that's what you need around you, and that's what you're trying to, those are the boundaries that you're trying to set.
100%. I view it values are sort of like breathing. We need it to be repeated over and over, and it has to happen. It becomes, but without it, we'd be in trouble, obviously. I think historically, like when you used to go in, I used to go into different offices across Canada for years. They used to always have these pictures that had these sayings. It was very interesting because they'd put them up on the wall, and this was a big thing probably 10, 20 years ago, where everybody had these sayings. And then sometimes I always stared at them, because you could see the inconsistency with that saying that they put up there and the way they're acting, or the cultural set that they're demonstrating for a particular company. So very interesting that they couldn't see that difference. So to me, when we put them up on the wall, sometimes people put them up on the wall to say, this is who we are, and what we want it to be that is truly who we are. There's people that put it up there, and I think they think that's who they are, but they're far from that, but they don't see that disconnect.
And that's where the refinement process, I feel like, comes in, because you can go and you can slap it on the wall and you can point at it and you can say, everyone do this.
Yeah.
But if you're not consistently refining it yourself,
right,
then you're going to miss your actions, the different patterns, the things that are happening around you. And then it just turns out to be a thing on the wall.
100%. And I was at a thing called Mackenzie University, and this was a long time ago. This would have been 30 years ago, and it was one of the big investment houses at the time, and they had a guest speaker, and he was the top broker in the US dealing with clients, and he was telling the story of how when he started, his client size was 25,000. That's account size. If you had 25,000, he would deal with you. When he was on stage there, that was the minimum, 25,000, and when he was on stage, the minimum there when he was presenting was 5 million. So if you didn't have 5 million, you weren't his client. And so he was telling a story about living his brand, if you want to call it, is that he had somebody come in and met with him, and obviously had 5 million or more because they're a client. But unbeknownst to him, as soon as that person left his office, he would treat everybody on this guy's team like shit, just terrible. And so finally the administration pool collectively sort of cornered the guy, the broker, and said, we have a question for you. You talk about this, 5 million, that's thing. But this is what this guy does. So it was a disconnect to say, I want to deal with quality people. Well, this person was berating the team. And so he sort of had his aha moment and called that client back in and fired him on the spot. So I think it's sometimes about that whole culture. It's not about saying you do something and then everybody's experience is the opposite in the culture. And that's why it's imperative when you have those quarterly conversations that you are accountable to that. And stuff like, do you see a time where we are inconsistent to our values? And that's that candid feedback. And then if you hear it, then now what are you going to do with that information? So to me, it's about having it front and center so that everybody can say, this is what we're all holding each other, that we're success partners in executing the values, right?
And it always comes back to what you do. It's how you act. Because even I'm thinking about like our value, the freedom to act. In the past, we've had employees that tend to talk more, right? Instead of watching their behavior set to see what they do, it was more of, okay, well, I'm going to go and learn this. I'm going to build this crazy thing. Like all of these amazing ideas and ways to revolutionize the world. But the step to be able to take that first action, to be able to start the execution side, was never there. And then now it's more of a pattern of, if it was the value was to say, talk a big game, well then perfect. But the value is to act.
Right.
And that's the boundary that we're setting. And then that helps us be able to refine that out.
No question about that. I think that, yeah, a lot of times there's that disconnect. And so all you're using those things and having them clear is so that we can clearly see the disconnect and that they can see it. And maybe it's as simple as they understand that there's that disconnect and they will dial down the talk and dial up the action, or they will dial themselves right out of the company because they're just not consistent with. By having that front and center, we're putting the definition, sort of like the attributes of the person and the people and the actions we need. And when they're inconsistent, then it gives them an opportunity to be consistent. But more often than not, when they're inconsistent to that, they're probably inconsistent with the fit to the culture of the company.
And absolutely. We've also had employees where we're saying execute and iterate, and that actually defines and drives their behavior, where they come back and they say, okay, well, I know this isn't the best solution, but I want to get it live.
Yeah.
And that guiding post like actually does dictate the behavior inside of the business and has changed or modified people's behaviors to be able to kind of execute more on what the company wants to be able to deliver.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. Hear, hear.
They're here.
Anchors up! Time to set sail.